faintly of burnt coffee and antiseptic. It was a small, windowless space where we'd gather during brief breaks, the fluorescent lights doing nothing to soften the sharp edges of the conversations inside. Tonight, as always, I was their favorite target. St. Rachel, Brenda drawled, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Off to room 507 again, I bet. You're really committed to that diaper-changing gig, aren't you? The other nurses burst out laughing, and I clenched my clipboard tighter. I was used to their mockery, but tonight it stung a little more than usual. It had been a grueling 12-hour shift, and my patience was wearing thin. Maybe she's hoping he'll wake up and sweep her off her feet. Another nurse chimed in, her tone laced with sarcasm. A real Cinderella story, right? Except he's a vegetable. More laughter. My stomach twisted, but I didn't react. That's what they wanted, for me to lash out, to give them more fuel for their ridicule. Instead, I adjusted my ponytail, squared my shoulders, and walked out of the lounge without a word. The hallway was quiet, the hum of monitors and the soft shuffle of footsteps the only sounds. I made my way to room 507, my steps steady despite the ache in my feet. I couldn't afford to falter. Not here. Not for him. Room 507 had become my sanctuary and my burden all at once. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the faint scent of antiseptic lingering despite my constant efforts to make the space feel less clinical. Daniel Grant lay motionless on the bed, his once powerful frame now frail and dependent on the machines keeping him alive. He wasn't just another patient to me. Daniel's file had caught my attention the moment he arrived. The photos showed a man in his prime, confident, successful, and larger than life. But the accident had changed everything. His car had been found crushed against a tree, the result of a late-night drive gone wrong. The details were hazy, but the damage was clear. A fractured skull, multiple broken bones, and a coma that had persisted for months. Most of the staff had written him off as a lost cause. To them, he was just another bed to fill, another chart to update. But to me, he was a human being, a man who deserved dignity, even if he couldn't ask for it. "Good evening, Mr. Grant," I said softly as I entered the room. It was a habit I'd developed early on, speaking to him as though he could hear me. Maybe he could. Maybe he couldn't. It didn't matter. I began my routine, checking his vitals, adjusting his and ensuring his feeding tube was secure. Then came the harder part, cleaning him and changing his linens. It was thankless work, the kind that drew mockery from my colleagues. But I didn't care. As I worked, I spoke to him. "You know, they think I'm crazy for doing this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I think they're wrong. I think you're still in there somewhere. And I think you're going to wake up one day and prove them all wrong." The machines beeped softly in response, their rhythm steady and unchanging. I smiled to myself, imagining what it would be like if he could answer. "Until then," I said, smoothing the blanket over his chest, "you've got me." Weeks passed, and the routine continued. Room 507 became my refuge, a place where I could escape the snide comments and the toxic atmosphere of the nurses' lounge. But even I had moments of doubt. Was I wasting my time? Was it foolish to care so deeply for someone who might never wake up? Those questions haunted me, but I pushed them aside. And then, one quiet evening, everything changed. I was adjusting his blanket when I noticed it, a faint twitch in his hand. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then it happened again. "Mr. Grant," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Can you hear me? If you can, try to move your fingers." Seconds passed. Just as I began to doubt myself, his fingers curled ever so slightly. My breath caught in my throat. "Oh my God," I murmured. "You're waking up." I pressed the call button, summoning the doctor and a team of nurses. The room filled with people, the air buzzing with urgency as they assessed his condition. But all I could focus on was the faint, steady pressure of his hand in mine. He was coming back. Daniel's recovery was slow, but it was happening. Day by day, he regained strength, his body responding to therapy in ways the doctors hadn't thought possible. By the end of the second week, he was speaking in short, raspy sentences. "Rachel," he said one afternoon, his voice weak but unmistakable. It was the first time he'd spoken my name, and the sound of it sent a shiver down my spine. "Yes, Mr. Grant?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Thank you," he said simply, his eyes locking onto mine, "for not giving up on me." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away. "You're welcome," I said softly. "I'm just glad you're back." Daniel's recovery sent shockwaves through the hospital. Word of his progress spread quickly, and so did the growing attention on room 507. Nurses who had once avoided him like the plague now lingered by the door, their curiosity barely concealed. I tried to ignore the stares and whispers as I walked into his room. Daniel was sitting up for the first time, his posture still weak but undeniably different. His once pale, lifeless face was now filled with determination, though his body bore the scars of his ordeal. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," I said, setting down my clipboard. "Daniel," he corrected, his voice raspy but firm. "Please call me Daniel." "Okay," I said with a small smile. "How are you feeling today, Daniel?" "Better," he replied. "Because of you." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. Gratitude was one thing, but there was something in his tone that made my heart skip a beat. He didn't just sound thankful, he sounded sincere. "I was just doing my job," I said finally, avoiding his gaze as I adjusted his fore. "No," he said, his voice sharper now. "It was more than that. I know what they said about me. What they said about you." I froze. "What do you mean?" He let out a slow breath. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But I could hear. Everything. My heart pounded in my chest as his words sank in. He'd heard it all, the laughter, the mockery, the cruel things my colleagues had said. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I thought of all the times I'd poured my heart out to him, thinking he was oblivious. "I'm sorry," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be," he said. "You were the only one who treated me like a person. I owe you everything." The day Daniel's full identity became known was the day the hospital turned on its head. It started with a routine news segment playing in the waiting room, a special report on Daniel Grant's recovery. "That's him," one of the nurses exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "That's the guy in 507. The room erupted into chaos as the staff scrambled to confirm what they were seeing. Daniel Grant wasn't just a patient, he was a billionaire, the CEO of one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country. His accident had made national headlines, and now his recovery was making waves. Brenda, of course, was the first to jump on the bandwagon. "I always knew there was something special about him," she gushed to anyone who would listen. "I mean, I practically spent all my free time in his room." I rolled my eyes but said nothing. Let her spin her stories. Daniel knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. A week later, I found a sleek black envelope waiting for me at the nurse's station. My name was written in elegant gold script, and inside was an invitation. Dinner at Daniel's estate. I stared at the card, my emotions a whirlwind of confusion and apprehension. Why would he invite me? What could I possibly say to him outside the sterile confines of the hospital? "Looks like someone's moving up in the world," Brenda sneered, snatching the card from my hands. She read it aloud, her voice dripping with mockery. "Dinner with Daniel Grant. How fancy. Guess he really likes charity cases." I snatched the card back, my face burning. "Grow up, Brenda." Her laughter followed me as I walked away, but I didn't let it deter me. I had a decision to make. Daniel's estate was breathtaking. A sprawling mansion surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens. I felt like I was stepping into another world as I walked up the marble steps, my nerves jangling with every step. The butler greeted me at the door, leading me to a dining room that looked like it belonged in a palace. Daniel was already there, dressed in a tailored suit, his presence commanding despite his recent recovery. "Rachel," he said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming." I offered a nervous smile as I took my seat. "This is incredible. Thank you for inviting me." "You deserve it," he said simply. "I owe you so much." The dinner that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The food was exquisite, the conversation easy and natural. Daniel spoke about his life before the accident, his rise to success, and the challenges he'd faced along the way. But what struck me most was his vulnerability. Do you know what it's like, he said, his voice tinged with pain, to have everything taken away in an instant? To be trapped in your own body, unable to fight back? I nodded, my throat tight. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. It was, he admitted. But what hurt more was realizing how many people saw me as nothing. Just another task. Except you. You gave me dignity when I had none. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. You deserved it, I said softly. Everyone does. As the night went on, Daniel's tone shifted. I've been thinking a lot about what's next, he said, swirling his wine glass. Not just for me, but for you. For me? I asked, taken aback. He nodded. You believed in me when no one else did. I want to return the favor. Come work for me, Rachel. Name your price. Whatever you want, it's yours. I stared at him, my mind racing. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. You're not just a nurse. You're a leader. And I want you by my side. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Daniel's offer lingered in my mind like a beacon, equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. Working for him meant leaving the hospital, the only place I'd ever known professionally. It also meant stepping into a world I didn't fully understand, one of wealth, power, and influence. Brenda and the others were relentless, their bitterness bubbling to the surface. She thinks she's too good for this place now, Brenda spat one afternoon. Can't wait to see her fall flat on her face. Their words no longer had the power to wound me, but they fueled my determination. If I was going to leave, I would do it on my terms, with no regrets. That night, I called Daniel. Rachel, he answered, his voice warm and steady. I wasn't sure you'd call. I've been thinking about your offer, I said, my heart pounding. And I'm in. The pause that followed was brief, but I could hear the smile in his voice when he replied. Good. You won't regret it. The transition was overwhelming at first. Daniel wasted no time introducing me to his world. A world of boardrooms, private jets, and high-stakes decisions. He insisted that I oversee the launch of his new foundation, which aimed to revolutionize patient care across the country. You're the heart of this project, he said during one of our meetings. It's your compassion that inspired it. While the work was challenging, it was also deeply rewarding. For the first time, I felt like I was making a real difference, not just in one hospital, but on a much larger scale. But not everyone was happy about my success. It started with small things. Anonymous emails questioning my qualifications, whispers of favoritism spreading through the hospital. I knew Brenda was behind it, but I had no proof. Then, one day, Daniel called me into his office. Rachel, he said, his tone serious. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were screenshots of messages Brenda had sent to a local journalist, accusing me of exploiting Daniel for personal gain. My hands trembled as I read the accusations. She's trying to destroy me. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with anger. She won't succeed. Daniel's legal team moved swiftly, gathering evidence of Brenda's misconduct. Her history of negligence, falsified records, and petty sabotage came to light in brutal detail. Within weeks, she was fired, her reputation in ruins. But Daniel wasn't done. At his insistence, the hospital implemented sweeping reforms, ensuring that patients received better care and that staff members like Brenda could no longer thrive in toxic environments. It was a victory not just for me, but for every patient who had been treated as less than human. As the foundation grew, so did my relationship with Daniel. We spent long hours working together, our shared passion for the project deepening our connection. He was no longer just the man I had cared for. He was my partner in every sense of the word. One evening, as we reviewed plans for a new facility, he looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. You've changed my life, Rachel, he said softly. Not just with the foundation. With everything. I felt a lump form in my throat. You've changed mine too. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotion. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to let him in, to trust him not just as a colleague but as something more. Months later, the foundation's first facility opened its doors. The event was a triumph, drawing media attention and praise from all sides. Daniel insisted on giving me full credit, his speech a heartfelt tribute to my dedication and compassion. As the applause faded, he turned to me, his eyes shining. "I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled, my heart full. We did it together. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much had changed. I'd gone from being the butt of every joke in the nurses' lounge to leading a nationwide movement that was transforming lives. But the most important change wasn't in my career, it was in me. I'd found my voice, my strength, and my purpose. And I'd found Daniel, the man who had shown me that kindness and courage could change the world. Despite the foundation's early success, doubt began to creep into my mind. The expectations were enormous, and I often felt out of my depth. Late nights in the office became my routine, poring over plans and budgets, trying to make sense of a world that felt foreign. Daniel noticed. "You're working yourself to death," he said one evening, finding me in the foundation's office long after everyone else had left. He placed a cup of tea on the desk beside me. "Talk to me. What's going on?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I don't want to let you down." "You could never let me down," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Rachel, you've already done more than I could have hoped for. This foundation is what it is because of you." His words were reassuring, but the weight of responsibility still pressed heavy on my shoulders. I wanted to succeed not for myself but for him, for everything he'd given me. Just as I began to find my footing, the foundation became the target of a vicious media campaign. Anonymous sources accused us of mismanaging funds, claiming that I was unqualified and out of my league. The headlines were brutal, from nurse to fraud, Rachel's rapid rise under fire. The accusations were baseless, but the damage was done. Donors began pulling out, and the board questioned my leadership. I felt like the walls were closing in. Daniel was livid. "We're going to fight this," he said, pacing his office. "They don't get to tear you down because they're afraid of what you've accomplished." But I wasn't so sure. "Maybe they're right," I whispered. "Maybe I don't belong here." Daniel stopped, his expression fierce. "Don't you dare say that. You belong here more than anyone. And we're going to prove it." With Daniel's support, I decided to take control of the narrative. I agreed to a live interview, something I'd never imagined doing. The cameras were intimidating, and my hands shook as I adjusted the microphone. "Why did you start this foundation?" the interviewer asked, her tone skeptical. I took a deep breath. "Because I believe that everyone deserves dignity, no matter their circumstances." I saw firsthand how broken our system is, how patients like Daniel Grant were treated as burdens instead of people. This foundation is about changing that. The interview aired to overwhelming support, and the tide began to turn. Donations surged, and the foundation's reputation was restored. But more importantly, I'd found my voice and the courage to use it. As the media storm settled, Daniel and I found ourselves closer than ever. Late nights in the office turned into quiet moments of connection, and I began to realize how much he meant to me. Not just as a partner, but as a man. One evening, as we walked through the gardens of his estate, he stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Rachel," he said, his voice soft but steady. "There's something I need to tell you." My heart pounded. "What is it?" He hesitated, his expression vulnerable. "I didn't just offer you this job because I was grateful. I did it because I believe in you, and because care about you more than I should." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I searched his face, seeing nothing but sincerity in his eyes. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say you feel the same," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I did. From that moment on, our relationship evolved into something deeper. We worked side by side, not just as colleagues but as partners in every sense of the word. Together, we expanded the foundation, opening facilities across the country and transforming countless lives. But the real transformation was in me. The timid nurse who had once been the target of ridicule was now a leader, a force to be reckoned with. And it was all because one man believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Years later, as I stood on the stage of the Foundation's annual gala, I looked out at the crowd. A sea of faces filled with hope and gratitude. Daniel was in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. "This foundation started as a dream," I said, my voice steady. "A dream to create a world where every patient is treated with dignity. But it's become so much more than that. It's proof that kindness, compassion, and determination can change the world." The applause was deafening, but my focus was on Daniel. He stood, his smile lighting up the room, and in that